All right, let's get started. I'll get this kicked off with just a brief introduction. My name is Emiliano. Most of you know me already. I got jBilling started about 12 years ago, and today I am the president of jBilling. And today I have a great co-author for this webinar. We have Sam. This is the same room, but look, this is my. I have Sam here. How are you, Sam?
Milano, I'm great. Thank you for the kind introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Bacon. I'm Director of Business Development here at jBilling, and really looking forward to having this webinar or co-hosting this webinar with Emiliano, and very happy that so many of you were able to join us today.
Sam, what have you done in the past few months that will help us with this presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, really kind of the reason this webinar came about and why we're so excited about it is that we've really spent the last kind of 6 to 12 months traveling around, visiting with customers, visiting with our partners, really identifying what the trends are out there in a number of industries and where billing stands today. We had this idea, and Emiliano has been involved in the billing industry for quite some time now and has a really good background of the evolution of it. So wanted to give this webinar and talk about the history of billing, where it came from, where it was, where it is today, and then also briefly talk about where we think it's going to be going in the future.
Great. And it's a good point that this webinar is Sam's idea. So I do hope you like it. So let's turn off our cameras and get those slides up and running. Hopefully you guys can see my screen now, and let's get started. So as we mentioned just now, the idea today is to review a little bit of where is it that billing got started, why, and how it evolved over the decades to where it is now, and potentially what is it that we can see in the near future. Well, billing is so close to what the economy does, what consumers do as far as how they consume products. So I think it's an interesting journey. I actually have to admit that I've been around for a couple of decades when it comes to billing, and at times it was fun, at times it was not. I would say the beginning was not, but it's been more and more fun. So I have a few things to comment, and I'll start with the past. So, when it comes to billing, traces its origins as far as automated billing, to the times where big computers started to be commercialized to industry, to private and the government, so they can automate something that before was done by hand. So imagine people that had to use calculators, which were not cheap at the time, and they had to spend a lot of time just adding things up and producing invoices with very, what we would consider very primitive means. But we're talking about, maybe 40 years ago, 50 years ago, billing done by hand without the help of a spreadsheet. That's what I mean. And IBM started to sell mainframes just for, in many cases, it was just to do billing. And those mainframes at the time, the mainframe was the big selling product for IBM. The software was like something that needed to be in order for those big computers to do anything useful. But IBM made its money from that hardware.
Emiliano, with this hardware, it really sounds like this was the very early stages of kind of the first subscription type businesses where people were automating the charging of products and services. What were the industries that really were the adopters of these billing systems back in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s?
Right. Well, so you see the telcos, for example, were an early adopter, and they were, phones actually were started to be popular. Like someone could actually have a phone at home, and at the time, the concept of a subscription was new. So these companies got started the idea of sending a bill to your house to charge you for a subscription, and usage. So subscription-based services got started at this point, and the early adopters were those industries like telecoms and utilities, and potentially government as well. Now, passing the first generation, which is fairly deep in the past, I actually was not there. Okay, I was not. I had nothing to do with mainframes. I'm way too young for that. However, I do have to admit that I was right in the thick of things for the second generation building systems, and this means some boxes, they were called the pizza boxes at times. They didn't. Some look like the one here in the slide, but some really look like a pizza box. Or HPUS and IBM RISC and the like. Big difference here. New industries could start using billing that were not massive multi-billion entities because it was cheaper. And by cheaper, I don't mean cheap. It was still quite expensive. You had to use an Oracle database. SAP got started here. Their big success, which is fast billing. They do much more than that. But big differences were, well, now you don't need to start from scratch every single implementation of billing. You could use some software that was already running for another company, similar company, and they were the concept of a billing vendor got started. And that brings us to the third generation billing systems, and these we could see maybe in the 90s they started, um, and they are mostly driven by the arrival of the internet. So, I remember working a second generation billing system. We had no clue that the internet would exist, and we were coding in C and the like for a utility. Third generation billing systems, it happened because technology advanced. You could have even a vendor hosting the billing software in some data center, and the companies using that billing system accessing the billing system through the internet. That was a very new concept, and that brought down cost again. And with lower cost, you have a larger piece of part of the economy accessing billing and being able to charge for things that require more complex calculations that require potentially automated payment processing with credit cards, all those new things that we are pretty used to now. Well, those were enabled by the third generation billing systems.
So, I mean, it sounds like this has really kind of been an evolution over time. And I think third generation, I mean, what was the heyday of third generation? You mentioned it started in the 90s. Has it been evolving ever since? And kind of what has that allowed? I mean, are those still kind of single company products? Are they still single solution billing platforms or billing systems? Or what kind of, how does this evolution kind of evolve over time from a technology standpoint, but also from kind of what products and services are being charged for?
Third generation billing systems still stick to pretty much a single product, or at the most a single industry. So you have a software for SaaS companies, and that's all they do. And don't ask them to do any telco. You have systems that do telco and potentially specialize on telco for mobile operators, or telco for satellite operators, or telco for wholesale operators. So third generation billing systems are very narrow in scope. Uh, they don't do more than what they are supposed to. They are not flexible that way, and I believe that right now is the time where these systems are having their glory days. There's many of them that if you go on the net and you look for a billing system, there's, I would say, 50 different ones that you can quickly sign up. And it depends on what is it that you're looking for. You might find one that fits quite well what you're doing now. Or maybe not, and you're out of luck and you cannot use a billing system hosted, which is the case in many companies.
So, Emiliano, I know you've been involved with these for a long time, and specifically on kind of the technology side, writing them, maintaining them, etc. I mean, maybe you can get into a little bit of kind of what the architecture, the deployment methods are, and some of the differences of those. I know we have a couple slides on that, but would love to hear a little bit more specifically from kind of that flexibility point that you mentioned as well. So, how has it evolved over time, and where is kind of the third generation at today? But where did it come from in the past?
Well, that really goes into my really next few slides. The architecture of these systems was truly influenced by what is it that was available, from a technological landscape. You have in the first generation is a mainframe. For today it looks like mainframes don't exist anymore, but they do, and there's lots of systems still running on mainframe. Go to a bank and go to an airline, and you'll see those evil green screens, of text. It is awful anyway. And there's billing systems still running there. So we have a lot to do. When I see that, I think there's a lot to do in this world as far as coding goes, especially on billing. It would take years to go into production. While second generation would take less, and third generation takes even less. If you go to a third generation billing system and you happen to be in an industry that there's a specific solution now, you're up and running almost immediately, or in a few days, or a few weeks, or a few months, depending on the complexity of your requirements. But you have substantially reduced the amount of time. For the deployment, though, you needed a whole team for first generation. While now it's a completely different thing. You don't need to. You might get away without having to install anything on a third generation billing system, or you might have to install something, but it's fairly lightweight considered compared with a mainframe. Imagine you had to allocate the basement to get the thing running. So big differences there.
I mean, with the deployment, however, a lot of kind of the discussions that we've had in the past, and we touched on it briefly, and I know we're going to get into this a little bit more later on in the webinar, but I mean, what is the customization that's still required? I mean, how many people are still required for each one of these generations? I mean, I know first generation, let's take over the entire basement of the office building. Second generation, maybe it's half that basement. Third generation, there are a couple other options, but I mean, are there still teams dedicated to maintaining it, to deploying it, to kind of improving it over time?
Look, I was there. I was one of those poor fellas stuck in the basement maintaining a billing system, and that was a second generation one. There are still poor fellas that need to be liberated for that, and I owe that to them. I have to get them out of those basements, get them into the open, get them to do something better than maintaining old code. First generation, you had pretty much the same team that wrote the code. Pretty much all of it, maybe not 100%, but 80%, will still be there because look, if you need to change a price, you have to ask a developer to change that price. So that's an extreme example, but it's a true example. As we move through the generations, that gets better. But no, you would think, well, since most of the billing is running on these three generations, things would be pretty good, but they aren't. If you are in an industry where you do not have a very specialized billing system, third generation type already written, you're out of luck. You have to go into a lot of customization. You have to go. You have to consider a lot of maintenance for that customization then to be maintained. That means supported, debugged, and changed as your business rules change. So imagine 100% on first generation, but you still have a lot of that going on for third generation when it comes to maintenance. And programming language. We don't want to stay here a lot, but for those of you that enjoy programming languages, you can see how they have evolved and how billing took advantage of that evolution to produce new generations of billing systems. Keep in mind, each of these generations was a big leap, not a minor enhancement. Big leap. It allowed for whole chunks of the economy to be more efficient, to offer new services, new products, this was important.
I mean, I imagine, especially with kind of how you spoke about deployment, but also the programming language, there's entire industries and companies that are built entirely around kind of the maintenance and kind of the patchwork of these billing systems as well. So kind of the reliance on some of these old code bases must be a fairly kind of large inhibitor for certain companies when thinking about what's next.
Well, it is, because it's out of range of a lot of medium and small companies. They just can't have, or companies that are not that small, but they have very tight margins. They can't afford a tier one U.S. company might spend $1 billion a year on billing. It's a true figure, and that is mostly because they have to maintain all those poor guys, developers doing billing, when they would much rather be doing something else than coding in C or COBOL. We discussed this already a little bit, how much customization is involved. In the first generation, customization is just, everything is customization, while third generation is almost the opposite. It doesn't allow you to customize when you actually need to customize. And that means then that they might be out of reach for you. You can't use a third generation billing system, or the one you need to use, you need to install, and you need to get the source code and modify a lot the source code, and hire experts on that particular package that just drive the cost up a lot. Now, another difference that it's important to keep in mind is how much value these generations bring to those companies. The first generation, although it was very expensive and it did a lot of good work, it just did a few things, which is, okay, let's calculate that invoice and hopefully print it. The second generation, printing was easier because you had printers all over the place. The laser printer had been created. But still, it will not do a whole lot of stuff that now you come to expect, like reporting and integration with things like CRM, integration with things like ERP or your financial package. Third generation aims, because it's much more narrow focus, aims to do more, but at a cost of flexibility. So it's not as flexible. Either you have it out of the box or you're out of luck. And if you have a third generation that you can modify, is likely more like a second generation written in newer languages. So you're still in a difficult position.
Now, Emiliano, maybe you can dig in a little bit more into what you mean by narrow focus from a third generation billing platform. Forgive me, but just a little confused on what you mean by that, and maybe you can elaborate on some of the benefits, but also some of the kind of the concerns that companies might have as they think about a third generation billing platform.
Well, by narrow focus, I mean that you need to be right in the right industry, the right size, and the right geography in order to use that billing system. So, for example, if you're a telco company that is in the US and that is say a satellite operator in the US, there's going to be a third generation billing system to help you. And it's going to do things like understanding the products that your customers buy, how they buy it, how they pay for them, and any regulations around that. The currency will be right because it's going to be the US dollar. The language will be right. So it's there for you. But it's narrow. If once you are not in the US and you're in Mexico and you still do the same thing, you're a mobile operator, a telco, a satellite operator, you rent satellite phones for people to take when they go on a boat or they go hiking or whatever. The business model might be exactly the same, but hey, hold on, now you have different taxes. You're out of luck. You cannot use that package anymore. And if you want to adapt it or customize it to do what you need, you can't because you're too small. It's just okay. Someone has the source code, and that source code should be able to you can modify it somehow, but it's not meant to be modified that way. It's not meant architected and designed for flexibility. It was designed to do this one thing, and that's the end of it. So that's what I mean by narrow focus.
Got it. So, I mean, to this point, we've really gone through what the 60s, 70s with the first generation through. I mean, you mentioned the heyday of the third generation being 2010. So,
yeah,
I mean, as the economy has evolved, as companies evolved, and as technology has improved, I mean, it seems like billing has really kind of opened up from kind of utilities to many different industries. And I know that we have this next slide that kind of shows the adoption of billing. So, I mean, can you talk us through kind of why you think these certain industries have kind of adopted billing during these different kind of decades, and whether they're still on it, and why they might still be on kind of the first, second? I mean, you mentioned there's still some first generation mainframe computers kind of there. I mean, why would someone still maintain a billing system from kind of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s?
It's crazy, but it's true. I think I read some numbers that IBM today, this is 2015. The Apple Watch is about to be launched. You're gonna have a computer in your wrist, and still IBM gets something like 20% of its profit from mainframe. It's just crazy. And I could be wrong on the exact number, but I'm not far off. The problem is that it's tough to convince a company that is running billing and is doing okay. And one good thing about old code is that all the bugs have been cleared. So this is code that runs well. It does what it does. It doesn't do more. And these companies are used to that, and they haven't been challenged enough to have to get out of it. So, government or large utilities, very regulated companies that is very hard for them to feel any kind of pressure as far as competition, as far as the need to launch new products. But that is changing, and we're going to get there. So, if there's no need for evolution doesn't happen, and they get stuck in this first generation. Same, but it's not just with billing, but banking and airlines and the like. They are also stuck with first generation systems. Second generation systems follow a similar pattern, and they do what they do, but there's a little bit more flexibility, and you still can hire a C programmer, right? It's not impossible. While the third generation, it's just a completely different system altogether. I think that we're going to see, we are seeing industries or new businesses that have business models that are radically different, and they could use a billing system, but there is no such thing as a third generation or any kind of billing system to help them out.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that. I think it leads us well into kind of the next part of what we'd like to talk about. I think what we've discussed so far, what it seems like we've discussed so far, is billing platforms that take us maybe up to 2010, 2011, 2012. So, I mean, I guess that leaves us to where we are in the present, and it really kind of leads us into what I've heard a lot from the market and reiterates some of those points. I think there are a lot of shifts in the economy that are changing the ways that kind of businesses charge for their products, but also the way that customers consume, the types of things that customers want to consume, the demands that customers are putting on companies. What we're seeing, or at least what I'm seeing from some of the conversations that we've had with customers, and these are customers coming from kind of the old guard of industries, so utilities, from telcos, but even infrastructure providers, even manufacturers, so across the board. But
car
manufacturers, exactly. I mean, we have examples like Uber. I mean, we're not powering their billing, but a very good example of a new kind of market. But it's no longer an asset-driven economy. I mean, it's really a change to a retail-driven economy. And what I mean by that is these companies that used to be selling an asset, so whether it was renting a car, or whether it was selling megawatts of power, or whether it was selling minutes of fixed line phone, it's really now they need to look at the customer, and they need to treat their customer very, very differently. And this drive or this change to a retail-driven model is definitely changing the way that these companies have to produce or kind of present their products, but also the way that they're going to charge for their products.
So, Sam, for example, let's take utilities. You know that it's a good industry to take as an example because it's been there for a while, heavily regulated. You know, they take it easy. Let's say, what is it going to happen? Right? Then it's not like I'm going to start my own utility and challenge Ottawa Hydro here anytime soon. But we've seen some changes there. Tell us about them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say one of the larger changes is, I mean, you're seeing a lot more distribution type companies where it's going to be similar to an MVNO model in the telecom space, where there's going to be these large power generation companies, but then it's really going to be smaller companies. Maybe they're on a regional basis, a local basis. They could be on the national basis as well, but they're going to be a distribution company that's essentially just distributing power from these larger power generation companies. What that means is that they're now a retail provider. They're now responsible for marketing. They're now responsible for collecting data from what their customers need. They're now responsible for innovative pricing mechanisms, but also they're no longer a one-trick pony. I mean, what comes with the retail model is additional products and services, the ability to bundle new things, the ability to add additional services on top, the ability to kind of merchandise and compete with one another as well. So I think it's kind of evolving the competition in the space.
And why now? Why do they want now to start selling something new? They haven't done it for decades.
Well, one, I mean, the margins are shrinking.
They are, right? They are.
A lot of these industries, I would say that the pricing power is definitely changing. That brings me up to kind of a second point that I was going to make about utilities is we see this especially in Europe, you know, the rise of renewable energies. It's no longer just the power generation companies that are creating this power. It's the average person that lives in the middle of the field that has a wind turbine, or someone that's living in Arizona that decides to throw up a few solar panels in their backyard.
A farmer.
A farmer. They now have the ability to sell that power back into the grid. And the complexities that come with kind of that type of pricing is very, very different. I mean, there's monitoring that needs to occur. There's the kind of the rebates or kind of the reseller model. So there's a lot of kind of technology out there, both from a hardware standpoint, but also from a software standpoint, where you're contributing to the actual end good, but also these companies are consuming data at a much more rapid rate, and they need to figure out a way to best kind of monetize that data. So machine to machine or Internet of Things are a couple of buzzwords that you'll hear a lot. But, you know, there are some industries out there that already have the customer demand and the customer relationship to really drive some new retail strategies or some pricing strategies around these new industries.
Right. So we have those old industries. Well, old by old is not that old, but you know, utilities compared to an Uber it's fairly old. That you know, with the margins under pressure, the need to even what they used to do, it has to be done in a different way. And I remember this example of they used to sell electricity per connection to a house, and you know they would bill for the connection. But now they need to send a bill to the owner of the house, and that will be a percentage of the usage, and another bill to the tenant, and they have to accommodate for that. There's no way the first or second generation billing system is going to understand that concept. It understands connections. It doesn't understand customer, like a person that buys potentially a fraction or has a different price, has a deal or a plan to pay an old bill. There's all sorts of things that come from being customer driven.
Absolutely, and I think that's a very good point. It's really changing the way that these companies are architected as well. So the staffing requirements, their ability to really change on the fly. And the other hard thing is they have to continue to charge for kind of their core product as well. I mean, everyone needs electricity. Everyone needs a telephone. I mean, there's still going to be that type of charging, but how do you add an innovative service or an innovative technology, or how are you going to charge for data on top of something or with a billing platform that's really architected for one solution. So I think
Right.
the ability to configure a billing system or a billing platform is going to be very, very important for what these companies need.
And everybody needs electricity now more than ever. You need to charge your watch in not too long, which is new. And my watch right now it just works with me moving, and that's all it takes. But we're going to need electricity, and that's provided by all companies, although it has to be potentially done in a different way. But then there's new companies that are coming into the economy because of the fact of having we all are having these smartphones in our pockets, or um, or we are able to consume services um, directly through the internet. And I used to buy music. I would go walk to the music store and get an LP. This is not a CD or a cassette. It was an LP. I did buy that. I'm that old, and now I'm subscribed to Google Music, and I pay a flat fee per month. So there's all under pressure, and there's new opportunities as well, and new companies.
Yeah, and I think that brings us today. I mean, these companies aren't. I mean, what we're talking about, it's not a dire situation. I mean, there are answers out there, right? I mean, there is another generation of billing that we can discuss, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for companies to take advantage of the next wave in evolution and the next wave of technology. I mean, the fourth generation of billing systems is something that's very real, and it at least in my experience, or what I've experienced so far, it's kind of just an evolution of the third, right? It's still based on cloud. It's still a cloud-based hosted solution. But I mean, there's a lot more technology that's gone into it that improves the ability for these companies to add new products and services, but also consume the vast amounts of data that the internet and technology and innovation allows. I mean, we've got technologies out there like Hadoop that easily scale, that they scale seamlessly. I mean, it's helping these companies not only identify trends, but also monetize things that they weren't able to monetize in the past. It's also highly configurable. I mean, the ability to add multiple products. It's no longer just one product on one billing system. You can easily add, 100 products or 100 business rules. It's really the fourth generation, in my opinion, is all about automating business processes and kind of making it easier for the company as a whole to innovate together versus having billing being kind of a cog in the wheel.
Exactly. I believe that there is a fourth generation billing system because these changes in the economy that we discussed are forcing that into, and also the availability of the right technology makes then that combo, that the requirement plus the technological advances make it possible to have a fourth generation billing system. I got jBilling started, and I started writing the code of jBilling in the early 2000s, and I remember because it was when my daughter was born, by the way, and we were right in the middle of the third generation. The internet was there, Java was there, but really there was hardly any, or if any, Java billing system. But I had been working on billing for a long time, and I had worked on second generation and third generation, but I could see that we were, doing this again and again and again, because we were writing billing systems. We didn't have a billing platform. We didn't have an application framework for the billing domain. So jBilling got started for us that as a core that understands billing, but doesn't implement any business rules that we know they are going to change. So jBilling, although it's a good 12 years old, it has evolved over time with things like Hadoop and the like. And the idea is it was always to have a billing platform. So right now, all these new business models for all the industries, as well as new companies like Uber that are changing the way things work for taxis, for example, they all can use a billing platform that could be configured rather than customized to their needs, and they can avoid having to deploy anything or deal with infrastructure because it's cloud based. And I want to make a big difference here between cloud based and just a hosted solution. If you're a hosted provider, you simply take your software, which is meant to serve a single company, and you put that into a server, and that server is in a data center, or maybe you get a virtual machine from Amazon, and your customer then can access the billing system. But that is all obviously more time consuming, more difficult to maintain, and harder to support. Not to mention that it's it's just longer to roll out as well. So a cloud-based billing system, it's I would compare this with what Salesforce did for CRM, where if you sign up for Salesforce, that you don't need to wait for them to set up an instance of their Salesforce for your company. No, it's a you simply get an account on them, and you don't worry about scaling or speed and stuff like that. With billing, it's much more complicated because you have massive batch process to process CDRs, for example, do billing runs, do payment processing runs, all those things here do not have. But you do have all these things on billing, and we could not have done this, say, 10, 20 years ago when the third generation was, very much current. Only in the past few years we could scale with Hadoop, have HBase and NoSQL big data sort of infrastructure to store billions and billions of records, and that's what I believe set aside a fourth generation based system from a third one.
Yeah, I think another good point, or very good point, but another thing I'd like to highlight is really the difference between configuration and customization, and the ability for companies to really extend their business model past what they're doing today and use a new billing platform to help them realize opportunities to grow into the future as well. And maybe you can speak to kind of some of the differences between some of those, and when you were developing jBilling, how you thought about that and how you kind of architected the system to kind of help enable companies. Maybe they can skip the third generation and go straight to a fourth generation, but what does that look like, and what are the main advantages of that?
Well, you see, when you design a fourth generation billing system, you cannot hard code business rules basically, and just hope that that's going to do for everybody. No, it won't. Um, in a fourth generation billing system, you approach the design of a module trying to make it as configurable, as flexible as possible. So a good example is what we did for asset management. For asset management, and we'll take a quick look in a minute to how it looks in jBilling. For asset management, we made it in a way that you do not need to worry about how those assets look like. Are there physical goods? Are there virtual goods like for example a phone number, or a license for software, or things that you are selling that are not tangible goods. Well, with our asset management, which does inventory, you describe that asset. You describe it to jBilling, and then jBilling understands your asset, and then you can represent the real world that is for you into jBilling without having to write Java code. It's a big difference between making it possible for you to use this billing platform, or having to get stuck with a second, third generation billing system and have to deal with a lot of customization. And I'll use that to move into how jBilling maps to fourth generation. Honestly, I do not see a lot of billing systems out there that are fourth generation. There are actually good cloud-based billing systems, but they might be very narrowly focused on an industry, like subscriptions for SaaS, or there might be fairly a kind of a combination of a second generation billing system, but with a few patches on top. But fourth generation billing systems are very hard to come around. So you're going to see many more vendors getting into this. Right now, at least we have jBilling that is truly cloud-based. It was thought from the beginning as a multi-tenant billing system. That's something you cannot patch a billing system into. You have to write it from scratch as something that, look, you can run many companies in a cluster of of uh, of servers that will take advantage of a lot of different little servers rather than one massive server. So it's very very important that it scales by using parallel processing, by using dividing the work in many little pieces and sending those pieces to a large number of virtual machines that they are all ready for work, and then all of them coming back with the results. That makes scalability possible. Um, I have seen, I remember in France, I was in Bull, and they have a team of people dedicated to the mediation of France Telecom. And they have, for at the time, and I'm talking like 10 years ago, they have a massive computer with hundreds of gigabytes of RAM, super expensive just to do the mediation because they couldn't split this in many pieces. The technology wasn't there, and even their thought process would not lead them to that. So that's a classic second generation. Fourth generation deals with throughput through scalability horizontal. Rich configuration. We also called it super configuration when we presented jBilling 4 last year. So all the modules are architected directly to not be married with any specific industry, but to be really, really configured. And that's what we'll see in a minute with a brief presentation and what I was talking about with asset management. Now, customization is not going away though. You'll have eventually to customize, or potentially, in some cases you might not need to. But if you need to customize, how do you write code that is going to be running in a platform that is running on the cloud? We have the answer for that is with plugins. With our plugin architecture, meaning a company, someone that needs billing, you can write your own plugin that has very specific rules embedded or encapsulated and will deploy that in our platform, and nobody else will be running that code. Because it's a billing platform, it's not a billing system that it does only one set of business rules. And that means with a combination of all we discussed that you can have even a fairly complex and difficult implementation done in weeks rather than months or years. I believe that the fourth generation billing system cuts down by 4 the amount of time you need for a rollout. So when you needed, say, 4 months, now you need 4 weeks. When a large project that needed 1 year, now it needs 2-3 months. So huge savings.
Huge savings. And quickly before we get in the demo, I think something that I heard that I'd like to reiterate is, the thought process around the business rules. Number one, not all business rules are the same, but number two, I mean, business rules over time continue to evolve, continue to expand. I mean, those legacy billing platforms, they were able to handle one business rule. Now there are 1,000 business rules for all of the companies out there.
It's very tough.
So the ability to kind of add business rules as you grow, I think is going to be more and more important. And, I mean, to that extent, it's no longer just the billing admin that needs kind of access to this. And with the configuration, it sounds like, and with the UI and all the capabilities that kind of not only the third, but the fourth has kind of taken from the third and grown on. Now it's really about finance having opportunity to automate their processes, sales automating their processes,
right? Product
accounting, just product management, everything with the billing admin and making sure that billing is a core to that solution.
That's right, definitely. And the good example for that is what's happening to utilities. They all of a sudden they wake up to new business rules, because there's new products, or even the old products they need to be sold differently, and they cannot configure the billing system. All they can do is customize. And customize an SAP implementation, it's extremely expensive, if possible. So let's take a quick look here um, to what Ziad can show us when it comes to configuration or customization. And I will just really quickly make a Ziad presenter. Hello, Ziad, are you there? Yeah, I can see your screen, Ziad, but I believe you're on mute.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Well, thanks, Emiliano, for the introduction.
Perfect, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Great. So, as Emiliano and Sam were mentioning, I just want to take a few minutes to show you some of the rich configuration that jBilling 4 has in place. The ability, just to recap, this configuration gives you control, the ability to add new functionality and business rules at a lesser cost, lesser risk, and much faster than customizations. And of course, we still have the ability to customize using the plugins. But for the next few minutes, I'll show you just the configuration. Now, what you're looking at right now is a jBilling UI, and I am right now at the configurations tab. And as you can see, there's actually a pretty long list of different configurations that we can play around with. But I'm going to focus on few only, given that they only have few minutes for this demo. And I'll start by a simple one, and let's start by currencies, for example. Now, jBilling not only gives you the ability, like the configuration doesn't only give you the ability to add new business rules, but also to extend your business globally as well. Now, this might look easy in jBilling, but in reality, it's actually a pretty problematic issue in billing systems or billing platforms. Adding new currencies to your existing system in jBilling, if the currency doesn't exist already, you simply have to click on Add New, add the name of the currency, the code, the symbol, and save it. And as you can see right now, I have the Australian currency, for example, added. So therefore, if your business expands from Europe and North America to Australia, it only took me a few seconds to add this new currency, which is Australian.
So Ziad, imagine if you're a company and you want to expand to some other markets that involve a different currency. What are your options then if your billing system doesn't support that currency?
I mean, I've seen many billing systems, and most of the time it's actually coding. Most of the time, you're going to have to code and really code, because a lot of systems were developed with a geography in mind. There's systems that support only US dollar and systems that support Europe, but it's hard to find a global billing platform.
Right, and I would say that even beyond the currencies, there's the languages, there's the format of dates, there is even the invoice presentation. They have specific rules in different markets that sometimes make it an invoice that you would normally send in one market, one country, illegal in another one, because there's some compliance that you have to have in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So that covers currencies quickly. Now I'll move on to collections, for example. And here, every company or even every division might have their own different business rules for collections. And there's an example on how you can configure collections in jBilling without any code changes or minor if required. For example, if your business rules require you to send a notification out after 7 days of the invoice due date, then I add a line here with that. And if I require after, let's say, 15 days, another warning sent out to the customer's email and trigger another payment against their credit card or their bank account, then simply I have to add a line and checkbox the notification and the payment checkboxes. You can add as many as many steps as you require as well. So let's say the third step would be to suspend the customer after 30 days of not paying, and after step 1 and 2 have been implemented already. So therefore, I add a third step, configure the number of days to be 30, and checkbox the suspend box, and that's it.
Great. So yeah, this is, I think, a good example of a module of jBilling not making assumptions of how many steps you need, what are you going to do with when someone doesn't pay. You might try to get paid again, you might send a notification, or you might do something else altogether, because we know that in every of these steps, a plugin of jBilling could be called and do any kind of extra customized step. Now, I know, Ziad, that you would like to show a whole bunch of other things, but we are running tight on time, so we'll have to leave it on this. Thank you very much.
Okay, no problem.
All right.
And we actually got a really good question from the audience. The question was, how do we handle taxes? So thank you for the audience member that gave us that question. To quickly answer that question, I mean, taxes are something that we can handle very, very easily. Emiliano, you probably know from a technical standpoint a little bit better, but there are a couple of different ways that we can go about it. And maybe you want to dig into some of the details around that.
Yeah, well, so briefly, the taxes we can do with tax engines, and that usually is the case for the US for telecom industry, because the taxes are so complicated. But then there's also there are plugins that we have already for Europe, for VAT, for example. Just put that plugin and that's it. And then there are combinations of specific plugins using engines to, like SureTax or Vertex, Avalara, that we have plugins for all of them. So taxes are something obviously we're fairly used to do. And yes,
I mean, so quickly, I want to be conscious of everyone's time, and we could talk about billing for days, if not weeks. But I think this slide kind of summarizes what we've discussed, and really kind of the evolution from Gen 1 to Gen 4, some of the differences between the generations, and some of the benefits of where we are today. I think it's a very exciting future, or very exciting kind of present day of what businesses can do and what businesses need to do in order to keep up with the next phase of their growth, but also the next phase of technology. But I mean, going from today, and Emiliano, you've been at this for the past 20, 25 years.
No,
hopefully you're going to be at this for the next 20 to 25 years.
But, well, I don't know all that.
But I mean, nothing stays the same, right? And it's evidenced kind of by what we've just discussed. So from your perspective, where do you see billing platforms going, and what function in the economy and what function in technology are they going to kind of serve?
Well, you see, there's going to be a fifth generation. And remember that a new generation comes about because there's two main drivers. One, the economy, the industries do need new functionality that the previous generation couldn't handle. And there's new technologies that allow for those requirements to be met. And we do not know what's going to come in the future as far as technology. We can wonder, but and we don't know actually the economy. But we can have a glimpse, I believe, in my opinion, that the fifth generation will come from a combination of both big data and artificial intelligence playing into the billing space. These are things that will play into many spaces, and billing will not be an exception. Just like the internet or the cloud computing or the mini computers or even the mainframes play a big role into billing. So you see, we consume all sorts of services now that we used to consume. I used to read the newspaper, but now I read the Wall Street Journal on my phone. I used to listen to music, but now I listen to music with a Google Play, and I used to watch movies, and now I watch Netflix. I still do those things, but now the providers of those services know what I'm doing. They know what I'm reading, when, how often, which movie I'm watching. They know everything. So I am generating data as I consume those services. And that data hasn't been made available to billing yet, but it's going to be available to billing. And if you combine all that data with artificial intelligence, then you'll be able to have billing doing much more than just billing. It's going to be able to suggest new pricing, new bundles, or even provide you with some trends, detect fraud. If you know what's going on, and you have a system that learns, a system that is intelligent, it can detect patterns of fraud. That today, to do fraud detection, you either have very specific rules that only work for that industry, that geography, that is very, very narrow, or you just need to code that from scratch as customization.
Very cool, and it sounds like there's a long roadmap and a long product roadmap to get started here on as we continue to evolve the fourth generation. It's going to be a very interesting world and very interesting kind of billing evolution to see how this kind of plays out and how it takes place. So,
and we'll be happy for jBilling to break new ground here. I do think that the fourth generation has a quite a bit, like 5, 10 more years to be relevant, and also I think the fourth generation will gather a lot of the first and second generation. They will go into fourth. I think that we'll see a pretty good upgrade trend as well. Now, I would like to answer some questions. We answered one quickly that we saw coming, but there's a few more. And one is for you, Sam. I believe that it would be good for you to answer it, which is which one. Which needs generation 4 the most, old industries or new economy?
That's an interesting question. I would say just from the upgrade path and kind of the legacy systems put in place, it's very important for these older industries or industries that used to be kind of one-trick ponies, so the utilities and the telecoms, to start thinking about upgrading their billing. The reason being is that they have to evolve their go-to-market strategies, and they have to evolve their business processes, and they really have to start thinking about ways to automate that. And I think it really starts with the back-end system or the central back-end system, which is billing. So with an automated billing platform, it allows kind of the entire company, from the marketing to the sales to the product management to the billing team, to really work together to think about how they can improve their revenue and can improve their margins over time. With that being said, though, there's no one company that should be standing still. So I think the fourth generation is something that everyone should think about considering and look into, especially as they come across more and more complex mechanisms.
All right, so I'll take just one more question, and I have here: what percentage of today billing is still done with first, second, third generation? So I would say that those 3 generations probably is like 95% of all the billing done is still done with first, second, and third, and even first. I would say, a good half of all the invoices are for sure done with first and second generation. When you take an invoice, when you get an invoice next time that goes to your home, and it is printed, like paper, which is already an old thing to do, and it comes from a utility or from your telco provider or your cable. It's almost for sure that it comes from a first or second generation. Almost for sure. It's a large chunk. So lots to do, and we're out of time. So I want Thank everybody for your interest and time. Send us comments, send us questions at this email address. And thank you, Ziad and Sam.
Thank you, Emiliano, and thank you everyone that's out there. And look forward to hopefully discussing this in more depth.